Hey guys, welcome back to the next video. In this video, we're going to see how to deploy Tomcat on your Kubernetes machine. Now, we have already seen how to do that on Docker environment in the previous videos. Now, in this video, it's going to be more focused on Kubernetes. Now, why should we install it on Kubernetes? So we already have Docker containerized as part of, Tomcat containerized as part of Docker. Now, why do we have to involve ourselves in another tool called Kubernetes? Very simple. These are the reasons which is in front of you. Now, this is the reasons what we're going to see and why we are actually preferring to host it on Kubernetes. And that in turns works on a Docker image or any kind of a containerized image. It doesn't have to be Docker, but it could be anything else. So now we can see that, these are the points. So I'm going to explain you one by one what these points mean to you and how it's going to be different from hosting it from Docker. Okay. So now these are some features which is not available in Docker by default. So which means that you need to go for a Docker Swarm or Kubernetes in that case. Now, what is Kubernetes? We have already seen. I don't want to go and talk about that because I have taken a lot of videos from my Kubernetes training to make you understand about Kubernetes so that you can start a little bit on Kubernetes and then you come over here and understand why you want to do that on Tomcat. Now, in the previous example, we have also seen that similar kind of things. Okay, so now we will just start from here. Okay, so no failover feature. So now Docker does not give any kind of a failover. So if you take a traditional, Linux server or a data center oriented server, we've been using a couple of servers for Tomcat, a couple of servers for HTTP, and a couple of one load balancing server. Okay, so that's a physical load balancer or a software load balancer, doesn't matter. But if a couple of servers, one of those servers fails, right, in Tomcat region, so you will be actually having another server which actually serves that, serves the request which is coming to it. Okay, so that kind of a feature you don't have in Docker. Okay, Docker, you can have two instances of running it, but the problem is like if one thing goes off, the other one will serve, but then there is nothing here as a load balancer. You still have to go with a traditional load balancer how you were using before. But Kubernetes comes with its own load balancing, service. So that we will talk in detail about this in this training, how that service is going to help you in terms of failover. But all this is manual in terms of Docker. So if a server fails, right, so you have to log in, recreate that image. You need to do that manually. Okay, so now that's the major difference between Docker and Kubernetes because Kubernetes does that autonomously without any kind of administrator interference. We don't have to log in or do any kind of a command execution to get this image running again. So that's something which is one of highlight in this point over here. And in terms of scaling, right? So scaling means like creating more instances of this image, many instances of this image in case if there is any requirement. Like for example, you're getting a huge number of requests and then you want to scale up, you want to scale down. So that's not possible in your Docker. So if you have to do it, then you have to log into the system and then hit the image again and again. And then you will have 4 or 5 images and then you will be scaling up and then you have to remove those images manually or delete those images manually. So which is like scaling down. But Kubernetes does this autonomously without your intervention with some basic protocols you assign to Kubernetes saying that in this situation you have to increase or scale up. In this situation you can scale down. So we will see some examples on this video. On this training about how your Tomcat instances scales up and scales down. So that also we will see. We will see also something like no monitoring of service, like we will also monitor the service and the process. Okay, so now I want to get technical here. So I want to see whether my service or the process is started and the port numbers are hosted, like, it's running before I establish myself, like, come alive, okay, live to the customers. So I want to see that, and that cannot be done in Docker image. Docker image is very static. So if you start the image and you see that the image is running, then it's kind of establishes everything on the network and everything else. But in Kubernetes, you can assign certain features in your files, which creates the image, and it monitors whether that particular process is up, the port number is up, and then only it will allow the traffic to come alive. So we will see that also as part of our training. And we will also cover what does no isolation mean. So isolation means like you can create namespaces, okay, which can isolate your resources from used by one application to another application. It will have a complete different network, but it will be on the same machine, but then it will be as though it is on a separate network. So like isolation is possible here in case of Kubernetes, but it was never possible in Docker. And no auto startup in case of crashed image. So it goes to failover again. It's kind of related, but when you kill an image or container in your pod, in your, to be very specific, right, pod in your Kubernetes, now this pod will respawn again because it realizes it has crashed or killed, right? So that kind of a feature is never there in Docker. So that's another reason why we need to do that. And I will show you in hands-on how it actually does that. And there is no clustering. Yes, very big defect in Docker is that there's no clustering, because Docker is never designed to have all these features. So I'm not blaming Docker, because Docker is a containerization platform. Okay, I'm not blaming it for not having this feature, because it was not designed to do so. As Kubernetes is an orchestrator, so it is designed to do all these orchestration. So now this is something which you should understand that. I'm not blaming here. I'm not complaining that Docker doesn't have it, but then Docker never designed to do that, these activities. Now that's what I want you to come out of Docker. I know you have learned this Docker as part of your basic to expert Tomcat training, but then this is far more advanced than the Tomcat training, and this is the next level. You can say, if you want to travel towards the next level stuff. So now here you have no clustering. Kubernetes has clustering. So in our examples, we're going to talk about, I'm on AWS right now. So now I'm going to have control plane and two clusters, which is going to be part of the control plane, which is compute plane. So now you're going to have those actually involved in this training, where you're going to have clusters built on top of, your Tomcat, and that's going to communicate to each other. So that kind of a clustering we are talking about. And it never had, Docker never had, or we worked with network relationships. So now you can see that these two images could be on different, it could be on the same network. It will have the same IP address because you have assigned a series of IP address to, Docker. So that relationship is there. But then I cannot share resources. Like the point I'm going to talk next is, like, cannot share resources between multiple container. In case of a pod, right? Pod works like you can have multiple containers inside a pod, which can connect to each other. We can have a network relationship. It can have any kind of a data relationship between them, and it builds up as a one single unit. Okay, so I can have my HTTP server, or one Tomcat server, one MySQL server as part of a pod. So that is something which you cannot do it in Docker. Okay, now what is a feature of it? What is a beautiful thing about this? Well, so if I'm going to have the HTTP server, the Tomcat server, and the MySQL server, I can have one data path which has all three listed of my database, application, my Tomcat application directory, my HTTP application directory. So I can have all those directories in the same thing. My RAM, my CPUs, all be shared among them. And I can have my network resourcing also shared among them. So this is highly efficient in terms of handling the request and stuff like that. So that's something which is possible in Kubernetes, which is never possible in Docker because it is not designed so. And then finally, not finally, one before final. So cannot share resources. And that's something which is kind of like related to these three of them. And sharing resources, meaning like what I just told you about, cannot be load balanced by default. So now Kubernetes comes with a beautiful service of ingress and egress, and then load balancing, clustering services. So these are services which is by default as part of your Kubernetes. So which means that you are going to get a beautiful load balancing service on your HTTP, Tomcat, and MySQL. So it's going to have the same loop of stuff which we will see detail in the architecture when we go before the training. And I'm going to include a lot of architecture pictures or videos in this training so that you can be aligned with what I'm saying. And then a lot of videos will be from my Kubernetes training as well for in terms of architecture diagrams for component explanation for Kubernetes, because Kubernetes component explanation is already done. So I'm going to use that, and then I'm going to integrate my own architecture from for this particular software, which is Tomcat, and then I'm going to see how you guys can understand so that you will get the core benefits of Kubernetes, as well as like you're gonna get the core benefits of working with this particular software on Kubernetes. Now, do remember that we already have a training on Docker and Kubernetes. So if you want to be an expert at that level, you can take that training as well. So that's gonna give you an edge. Because you're going to have the general idea of Kubernetes, though this training will loop all over that, but then it only takes in some very high level concepts of Kubernetes and then goes in depth with Tomcat on that. But if you want to focus more on Kubernetes and Docker, that's one way to do that. Thank you again for watching this video. I hope it was useful for you. It's just going to be the first level or first step towards Docker and Kubernetes towards Tomcat, and we're going to see how Tomcat can be hosted through that. Thank you again. I'll see you on the next one.